Good evening, ELA 11. Tonight I'm going to prep us for the multiple choice section of part one, the first reading section. That link has been uploaded to Classroom. Follow along. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you some tips that I use when I go through these, and I'm going to read it. And based on the tips that I've given you, I'm going to sort of decipher the meaning, and I'm also going to keep a stopwatch, and we're going to do this whole bit, and we're going to try to keep it to 8 minutes. Because remember, one of the big things that we talked about at the beginning, we've been talking about the whole year, but at the beginning of the year, I prepped this for you, is that if you break down the timing of the New York State Regents exam, including all reading sections, including part one, reading part A, B, and C, part two with the glorified DBQ as I call it, and part three, it roughly breaks down to something like 8 minutes per reading section. So I'm going to show you today how you can do that in 8 minutes and be critical as you read and not just fly through it. So that's my goal. We'll see if that works. So this will be kind of an experiment. And to be honest, and I was brutally honest with you in the first video, I hope you guys check that out. I was honest with you about, I'm going to put this as a 8-question quiz, as a Google survey. I don't care if you cheat. It doesn't matter. This is for us to, figure out where we are with our multiple choice abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. So again, this is the June 2019 ELA Regents. All right, so that being said, here we go. So the first thing I always say, and in this case, what I always say actually would be pretty helpful for you. And I'm not, again, I don't have time to do like bells and whistles, but like, look at the, that's going to be backwards for you, never mind. But if you have it open in front of you, look at the author information and the little text it gives you at the end. And I'll give you a second to pull it up and look. Although I guess you don't need a second because you can just pause it. But I'll give you a cool screen to pause it on while you go do that. Okay. So this says Arthur C. Clarke. Now some of you might know who Arthur C. Clarke is. If you don't, I'm a nerd. So I know Arthur C. Clarke is a big science fiction guy. He is famous for his dystopian future science fiction literature. But that's fine, whatever. But the story is called If I Forget Thee, O Earth. If I Forget Thee, O Earth. So immediately the title is telling me something about why would you want to forget Earth? Like, aren't we on Earth? And this is a huge hint to the content of the story. And it's from a text called Expedition to Earth, 1999. Expedition to Earth, 1999. So why are we going to Earth? Where are we? All right, so this introduces the first sort of thing that I want to talk about when you are deciphering the text, when you're thinking about the text. The first thing you want to think about, and this is for part one, this is for also part three, is what is the setting? What is the setting? There's a guaranteed question about what is the setting going to be? And sometimes it's not easy to figure out. And that's why, like I said, looking at the information provided at the end of the document can tell you what the setting is. So here we can tell the setting probably is not Earth. Expedition to Earth tells us that we're going from somewhere to Earth. All right, 2. Generally, and this is something that I always want to emphasize, is the idea of conflict. Is what is the conflict generally happening? What are the types of conflict happening? If it's a part 1 text, you might not get a question about that. But if it's a part 3 text, that's definitely something you should be honing in on. Like, what is the conflict in the text? That's going to be something that you're going to be describing as you describe the central idea. More on that later. 3. what are the emerging central ideas? What are the emerging main ideas? What are the emerging ideas that are happening? I cannot emphasize this enough. This is the skill. Bottom line. Um, as we've gone through these this year, you've probably noticed that you know I think like out of the 24 multiple choice questions, you're always going to get something like 6 to 8 multiple choice questions out of the 24 that have something to do with what is the central idea, what is the main idea, or how does this detail establish a central idea. So um, every time you're reading a sentence or a paragraph, and you're like, what is the purpose of this paragraph? Why is the author, why are these words here? The authors are picking their words like they name their children. These are published authors. So why are they putting these words in order? And the central idea is established through the word choice. So the sequences of words and sentences arranged into paragraphs into the text, they're establishing central ideas. Another one that they love to do, the second most popular type of multiple choice question, is the idea of how is this vocabulary word being used? And here's the hint on this one. There's actually like a little bit of a life hack. Your central or your words in context, you get footnotes about them, a lot of them. So be prepared for words you don't know that don't have a footnote. That's kind of like a cue, like, oh, I should circle that. I think they're probably going to ask me about that later. Otherwise, they would have given you a footnote. I would say, maybe 25% of the time. That's a big number. 25% of the time, if you encounter a word that you don't know, it's probably going to be in one of the multiple choice questions. So when you encounter words that you don't know, in real time, you're trying to figure out what does that word mean in context. So that's important. The next one, and this is the third most populous question, is the idea of character development. Oftentimes what they do is they drop you in the middle. It's like Google Maps when you take the little dude and they like drop him in the middle of somewhere. I love doing that, by the way. But anyway, often what they'll do is they drop you, not often, every time, every single text you get on part 1 and part 3 is you getting dropped into the middle of a sentence almost, or the middle of a paragraph, or the middle of a chapter, or the middle of a book, and you have no idea what's going on. All you have is the title of the book or the story. You have no information. It's like ... Bill was at a party. It's like, who is Bill? What party? They're just dropping you in the middle of the sentence. So the first thing you want to try to look for is like, who are the characters? What are the characters and what are their relationships? So anytime it says something about how a character is related to another character, definitely circle it. What I do is, and I'll show you when I go through this, is I'm going to circle them and I'm going to draw a line. And I'm going to write next to the line what the relationship is. Because sometimes having the knowledge of what the relationship between two characters will tell you something about that character. And like I said, we'll get into that in a second. I'm seeing right now that this is going to be a separate video from the actual reading of it, because I want to give you the hints before you go into the actual reading. So look at the characters, examine their relationships, and then think deeply about how their relationships are telling you something about that character, right? So, and it might not be like, they might not tell you. It might be like, Rick was at the party and the party was boring, and he, pulled, the young boy next to him and said, it's okay, it's going to be all right, we'll go get ice cream later. And you're like, all right, that's weird. I don't know who these people are, but, clearly that little detail tells you that they're close. The next thing, details about the plot as they emerge, keep track of them. Every new instance of a new setting or a new character or a new conflict or a new idea, anything new, just circle it, underline it, because it's going to be telling you something about the development of the plot. And like I said in the last one, you don't know what the plot is. You're dropped in the middle of it, and that's why they give it to you, because it's, they're giving you this fresh, you've never seen this novel or short story before, and that's part of why it's difficult. So keep that in mind. And then how those characters react to things tells you about what that character is like. So if a character is, other characters treat that character harshly or are critical of that character or get along with that character, is going to tell you about who that character is. And if the character is treated harshly given the setting that they're in, we read the one at the beginning of the year where it was about the woman, and the text was from the early 20th century, and she was, kind of artistic and creative, and that was frowned upon by society at the time. It's going to tell you about that character. She doesn't care. Like she is her own woman. Like she doesn't care what people think about her. And then finally, and I'll end it at this one. Keep track of your figurative language. Anytime symbolism is used, or metaphors, or similes, or hyperbole, or irony. Irony is a big one, and they love irony because irony is really tough to figure out. So they love giving you questions about irony. But anytime there's figurative language, keep track of that. Make a little star next to it, circle it, because that when you get to the multiple choice questions, they're going to be like, what does the figurative language in line 12 mean about the development of the plot? Once you start seeing these questions, it's the same every single time. Once you get the format of the multiple choice, it's the same thing. What does this detail? What does this element of figurative language? What is this interrelationship between these characters? What does this plot development reveal about the character? What does it reveal about, central idea? What does it reveal about the main idea? They're the same questions every single time. So I'm going to stop this video here and upload it, and then the next video will be right after it. I'll just read it, and I'll basically, based on what we just talked about, I'll stop and sort of annotate, and I'll do it within a time frame, and I'll be strict, right? I'll have a stopwatch of 8 minutes, and we'll see if we can get through it. All right? Cheers. Miss you guys.